What's going on, Tix Tribe? It's your boy Irontixc, and welcome back to another video. So today for you guys, we are going to be watching a little animated horror film, kind of. I literally just saw this while scrolling on my YouTube recommendations, and kind of funny because I actually do DoorDash every single day. So I found this and I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to make a video out of it. So if you guys want to watch this for yourselves, I will have the link down below as well as the channel. So if you guys want to go check them out, pay your support, whatnot, it's down there in the description. But anyways, let's get into it.
I used to occasionally deliver for DoorDash on the weekends. This happened about a year ago, and at the time DoorDash was new to my area. Not many people used it, but if you worked at the right times, you could still make well above minimum wage.
I'm also really hoping that y'all can hear this. So
It was a Friday night, and I got a request in the app to deliver to a house around 8 miles away. The house was on a deeply wooded back road, with absolutely no streetlights. Like, literally, if you turned your headlights off at this time of the night, you were completely blind. I delivered to a house in this area once before, but that was when it was light out, which, trust me, is a way different scene. I didn't have much for phone service, so it was difficult to find exactly where I needed to be. But after a while, I finally found the place.
tell you guys one thing though. I do DoorDash every single day, like I said. It's so hard when it's dark out because it is so hard to see houses, especially because some houses don't leave their lights on. So it's so hard to see houses at night sometimes. It's a fucking bitch. But yeah.
The house seemed pretty similar to a lot of the other houses in the area, secluded looking, and right on the edge of being able to comfortably call it abandoned. I pulled up to the house, and because of the limited visibility, I decided to keep my car's headlights on while I dropped off the food at the door. But to do this, I had to keep the keys in the ignition, and so I did. I figured it wouldn't be the end of the world if I left my car running for an extra 30 seconds. I took the bag of food to the front door. I knocked a few times, and waited about 20 seconds when my phone went off. I was getting a call from a blocked caller ID. I decided to answer it in case it had anything to do with the food I was delivering. It was some man who sounded completely normal. He explained how he was the one who placed the DoorDash order, and he then asked me if I could just bring it to him around back. I was already sketched out as is, and so I told the guy no way. If he wanted his food, he needed to come to me up front. But to that, the line just went dead. I told myself I'd wait at the front door for one more minute, and if this guy didn't show up, I was just gonna leave. Maybe 30 seconds passed, and the guy did show up. The front door opened, and I looked at the dude. He was wearing a black ski mask, and was just standing there looking at me. I held out the food, but he made no reaction. That's when the guy yelled out, "Alright, now." Right as he said this, 3 men, also wearing ski masks, came sprinting out from around the back of the house towards me. My flight reaction kicked in immediately, and I ran straight to my car. I opened the door, put it in drive, and had the pedal to the floor in no less than 2 seconds. The men were able to hit my car a good amount of times before I was able to drive off. With what, I don't know, but something strong enough to break my back passenger side window and make a few other dents. Not even a minute into driving off, and I got
Well,
two
damn.
back-to-back calls from a blocked caller ID that I can only assume were both from the same guy. I let both calls ring until they stopped. I was shaking uncontrollably and still struggling to regain my composure. But after a few minutes, I calmed down enough to call the police and report the incident. And that was that. I don't know what ended up happening, and I genuinely don't want to know. I've tried to distance myself from the whole situation as much as possible. It's beyond terrifying for me to imagine what those guys had planned for me that night. A part of me thinks it was just to rob me, but another part of me thinks they wanted to kidnap me, or worse.
Well, damn. That's fucked up. Shit.
This happened back in 2019 on a Friday night in January. I had just gotten back from work and was honestly way too tired to make my own food. I always heard good things about food delivery apps, and so I figured that night was the perfect night to finally download one and try it out. I just downloaded the first one that showed up. I then made an account, placed an order at a semi-nearby restaurant, and turned on Netflix to watch while I waited for it to arrive. Now, it's worth mentioning that on this night in particular, there was a lot of snow on the ground. The app said the delivery would take around 20 minutes, but I figured that didn't account for the terrible driving conditions. I honestly assumed it would probably take double that. I can't remember exactly how much time had passed, but it finally got to a point where I figured I'd just forget it and cancel the order. But right before I did, I got a message from the driver. Word for word, the message read, "Can't find your house. What's your personal phone number?" Now, you gotta remember, I had just downloaded the app that night, so I didn't know if it was common or not for drivers to ask for their customers' personal phone numbers. But I ended up giving it to him anyway. Around 10 minutes later, he would contact me, but not over a phone call like I expected. The guy texted me, saying he'd be at my place with the food in 10 minutes. This unsettled me a bit. I was under the impression he needed my phone number so he could call me and get better directions, but I just tried to brush it off. Around 10 minutes later, I would get another text saying he left the food on my doorstep. I went outside to get it and sent a text back thanking him. I figured that was that. But around midnight, I would get another text. It was the delivery driver. The text simply read, "I really liked your sweatshirt." This was now getting extremely weird, as the text suggested that the guy had stayed to watch me grab the food from my doorstep. I tried to play it cool and responded with something like, "Haha, yeah, thanks. It's pretty nice." I can't remember everything that was said next, but it was some string of multiple texts that were something along the lines of, "So how's your night going? What are you up to?" and various other seemingly harmless messages. To these, I didn't respond. At the end of the day, I told myself I didn't know this guy, and I had no obligation to keep a conversation going. So, I just went to bed. But come morning, I would wake up to 20-something texts, and multiple missed calls, all from the same number. It was again that same delivery driver. The last text was sent at 3 a.m., and as I scrolled through the texts, two in particular caught my eye. One of them read, "I'm outside your house," and the other said, "I can't see anything through your window. It's too dark."
What the fuck?
That wasn't even the worst of it. I would later go outside to find footprints in the snow that I knew for a fact were not there the other day. Meaning, this guy wasn't joking. He had actually showed up to my house, and by the looks of the footprints, had walked around it multiple times. I've since moved, and haven't received another text from the number. That was the first and only time I will ever use a food delivery app.
What the fuck? What? That's a thing? Bro, what?
I'm 27 and currently out of work. I recently got laid off at my job, as the company I worked for was starting to go under.
Okay, I've been doing DoorDash for at least a total of about 8 years. Not, frequently, but like couple years here, couple years here, couple years there. But now I've only been dashing for about, I don't know, a little less than a year, way less than a year. I've only been dashing for about 5 months, I think. But I have never once had a problem with DoorDash. Not once. The only type of problem I've had with DoorDash is somebody ordered from a place that was already closed. So then I had to message them and message DoorDash. It was the whole thing. But never this shit. What the fuck?
So, in an effort to keep up with the bills, I started delivering for Uber Eats part-time. A couple of my friends suggested it, and so I figured I'd give it a try until I found another job. To my surprise, it was actually good money. The only thing I didn't like was some of the places the app had me delivered to. I live in a city with a lot of sketchy areas. I try to stay away from those areas while delivering, but there's only so much you can do. This night, a Saturday, I got a McDonald's order. I usually don't accept those ones, but this night was strangely dead, which was weird. Saturday nights are usually the busiest for Uber Eats. Anyway, I pick up the order and start heading towards the address I'm given. Instantly, I realized it was not in the best area, but by this point, I decided to just suck it up. I pulled up to the house, and right away the vibe was off. It was completely dark with not a single light on in the house. Usually there's at least a light on upstairs, or something that would signal someone being awake and waiting for their order. But the house seemed dead.
Hmm.
Nevertheless, I put the car in park, turned off the engine, grabbed the order, and started walking towards the door.
That
I
ain't
walked
ever
onto the
good, bro.
porch, and as I reached for the front door, I saw it. The door was slightly cracked open. I knocked, and as I did, the door opened slightly more. I yelled out that I had an Uber Eats order, and right away some man walked to the front door, like as if he had just been waiting right there. As he got closer, I got a good look at him. Now, I'm not one to judge a person by their physical appearance, but this guy was practically covered head to toe in tattoos. The guy looked extremely intimidating, definitely not someone you'd want to mess with. He had this look of frustration, or almost anger on his face. He was staring at me dead in the eyes. I lifted up the bag of food, and he grabbed it. The guy then started reaching in his pocket. I figured he was going to give me a tip. But no, before I knew it, the guy was holding a hunting knife and pointing it in my direction. My stomach dropped, realizing the situation I was now in. I was either going to get robbed for everything I had, or worst case scenario, killed. My mind was now racing. Thinking as fast as I could, I turned around towards my car, screamed at Derek to grab the gun, and put my hand in my pocket to start my car's engine from a button on the key. But there was no Derek, and I was in no way armed. But I figured if I could somehow convince this guy I gave myself a chance to get out of this. All I could do was pray that the threat along with the vehicle starting would be enough to convince this guy I didn't come here alone. And luckily it was. The guy shoved me back and slammed the front door. I ran back to my car and practically tore the door off trying to get in. I got out of there as fast as I could. I would of course end up calling the police, but I never heard anything back about whatever ended up happening. I assumed they didn't find anything, and that the guy was long gone by the time they arrived on scene. But I can't confirm this. If there's one thing I'm sure of, it's how fortunate I am to own a car with a remote proximity key, as I don't think the guy would have bought the whole act if I didn't start the engine. I still drive for Uber Eats every once in a while, but I've since started carrying a knife on me at all times.
Bro, I'm speechless. That's crazy. What the hell?
The pandemic has been pretty hard on all of us, and we've all felt its effects in a variety of ways, but musicians have felt it more than most. I don't mean to throw myself a pity party or anything. I know there are older folks who are actually fearing for their lives, so I've counted my blessings plenty of times. But for most of my friends, the pandemic just meant working from home or taking a long paid vacation. For me, it meant work dried up entirely. As a professional musician, I've been playing music both solo and with bands for most of my adult life now. It's fun, but it can be really tough on occasion, and this pandemic has been the toughest time I'd ever experienced. I had to do something, anything to pay the bills, so when the drummer in my band said that he was making some pretty decent money for working for Postmates, it immediately sparked my interest. I think the real selling point was how it had benefited his health. Us musicians tend to be much more familiar with a bottle and a glass than an elliptical machine, so riding a bike and getting paid to do it seemed like a great way to get back into a fitness regimen. So, dust off my young brother's old mountain bike, oil up the gears, get myself a Postmates driver's account, and I'm pretty much ready to go. I mean, it's kind of messed up that there were no background checks or anything. Like I literally could have been anyone, but hey, I wasn't complaining at the time. I needed the money, I needed it bad, and there were much worse things than delivering acai bowls that I could be doing. But being a delivery driver brought a whole host of new occupational hazards, and there was one particular incident in the summer of last year that I've thought about almost every single day since it happened. So, I get this one job delivering Thai food over to a place in Brentwood, just this little single-story house that barely stood out from the rest. Postmates has us doing the whole contactless delivery thing by that point, but I always used to hang around just to make sure whoever it was got their food. Sometimes you had some pretty elderly people ordering from us, since some didn't have any other means of getting food without exposing themselves. It meant a lot to me to know that I was helping like that, even if it was in such a small way. Anyway, The dude comes
Oh
out to get his
my.
food, and he's not nearly as old or infirm as I first expected, but he does look tired. And not just like my neighbor's dog was barking last night kind of tired. He looked like he was over his own life, just a deep exhaustion set into his eyes. He thanked me through his mask and told me Postmates had been a godsend since his wife left. I could relate hard to that. My long-term girlfriend had left at the start of the pandemic too. She just couldn't handle the stress, couldn't be so far away from her parents during such a difficult time, so I knew what he was talking about. Like I said, he seemed sick and tired, but he didn't hint at actually being depressed or mad or anything like that. He just seemed to be doing that macho guy thing of internalizing all of his feelings and, again, hard relate. Like I said, I often stuck around to make sure people got their food, and I'd also make a point of thanking people if they tipped big, and boy, did tired guy tip big. Right as I'm about to ride off on my bike, I make a point of telling the guy how grateful I am that he was so generous with his tip. It's literally people like him that mean I don't have to pawn my guitars to pay the rent. He just kind of nods, then says, "Just don't make the same mistakes I did, kid." I wasn't a kid. I was 28, but the weight of experience in the guy's voice, I just took it on the chin. The very next day, I get another delivery up that way, so I decide to cycle past the guy's house. I'm not 100% sure why, I guess I'm a creature of habit or something. But as I roll up, I can already see that something is horribly wrong. There's a cop car sitting in the guy's driveway, and his gate is blocked off with blue and white police tape. There's one cop sat in the driver's seat of the cruiser, and he gets out to ask me why I'm gawping at a crime scene. I ask him what happened, and he tells me to move along before turning his back on me. But then on the fly, I say "But, officer, that's my uncle's place." And I drop the same name he'd used for his Postmates delivery. As soon as I say that, the cop stops dead in his tracks and turns around and sighs. That's when I know it wasn't just some home invasion or a car theft or something. That's when I knew it was darker than I could have imagined. The cop says something like, "Look, I'm sorry, but you're better hearing this from the next of kin. Besides, homicide doesn't have a full picture of what happened yet." "Is he okay? Is my uncle okay?" I ask. He was taken to the hospital, but after that, I'm not sure. I'm so sorry, sir. I had to do my own research to find out what exactly actually happened, and to me, it was way worse than home invasion or something. The older guy, the one who'd been so generous with his money and his advice, had a full-on mental breakdown the very same day that I brought him his food. From what I could gather, he'd been ranting and raving in his driveway, and then when the cops showed up, he waved a gun in their faces.
Oh jeez.
And that's all she wrote. They shot him dead right there in his driveway.
Oh jeez.
I don't know if he was trying to end his own life by cop or he actually had some kind of mental breakdown. But if it all happened that same night I dropped his food off, then I basically fed this guy his last meal. The final thing that ever passed his lips. A couple of hours later, he was dead. I don't know why, but that messed with me something awful over the weeks that followed. I kept thinking that maybe if I'd stuck around, maybe if I asked him more about his problems or his life in general, maybe it had given him the strength to carry on, at least for a little while.
Damn.
Or maybe it was always going to happen. Maybe he'd planned it or something, and nothing I could have said would have made a difference. For the longest time, those were the kinds of thoughts that I just couldn't seem to shake. Like the guy was a ghost that just haunted me, no matter where I went, or what I did.
Damn.
On the night of the 27th of October, 2013, Tavisha Paris was working his final shift as a pizza delivery driver. The 25-year-old Sri Lankan migrant had moved to the UK to pursue a degree in IT and had long been employed as a delivery driver to support himself as he studied. But since he graduated with distinction from the University of Sheffield, Tavisha had quickly found himself a well-paid job in the IT sector. The generous pay package meant that it would be much easier to apply for permanent residence in the UK, which would open the door to eventually moving his family over too. His boss was sad to see the back of such a hard-working young man go, but also happy to see Tavisha moving onward and upward in his chosen career path. All he had to do was work one more shift, just one more night, and he'd be starting off his new life as a white-collar professional. At around 10 p.m., Tavisha would have been making one of his final runs of the night as he drove out to Southie Crescent with a customer's order. As he parked his car, unfastened his seatbelt, and opened the driver's side door, Tavisha was greeted by the looming figure of 25-year-old Qasim Ahmed. Qasim wasn't the one who ordered the pizza, but still wanted something from the delivery driver: his mobile phone. Tavisha saw a flash of steel in the dim streetlights as his mugger pulled out a knife and threatened to stab him if he didn't hand over his phone. But Tavisha was brave. Too brave, perhaps. He had worked hard to be able to afford an expensive smartphone, and he wasn't about to hand it over without a fight. There wasn't a fight that night. It was a slaughter. Without so much as an ounce of provocation, Qasim Ahmed plunged the knife into Tavisha's chest, who fell back onto the pavement, gasping as he attempted to stem the bleeding. As he lay dying, Qasim's 18-year-old partner in crime, Shamraze Khan, rifled through Tavisha's pockets to relieve him of his belongings. With just one stab wound, Tavisha might have stood a chance of surviving the attack. But Qasim knew he had seen his face, and he knew the hard-working young migrant wouldn't just take the robbery lying down. The police would be called, a report would be filed, and repeated offender Qasim would no doubt be headed back to prison. And in Qasim's mind, that just wasn't going to happen. He knelt down and began plunging the knife into Tavisha's chest over and over again, stabbing the dying delivery driver a total of 14 times until he bled to death, right there on the cold Yorkshire pavement.
Oh my God.
The local community was appalled by the brutality of the murder, but also by the horrific and painfully tragic circumstances. Just one more night on the job. If Qasim Ahmed had waited just one more day to steal a phone or a wallet, Tavisha would still be alive.
Damn.
It's like some cruel cosmic joke, so utterly senseless that it almost sounds made up, and many were moved by the story. Given that Tavisha worked for Domino's in the UK, the company paid for his family to fly over so they could better organize his repatriation, as well as working more closely with investigating police. Tavisha's older brother, Pramod, spoke to the media on his arrival in Britain, saying, "I'm heartbroken. My brother, Tavisha, was the center of our world. He gave us so many reasons to smile. He was kind and considerate, and we were extremely proud of his achievements. We were so happy that he was doing so well in England, and we never thought his life was in any danger. I can't believe he was taken away from us in this cruel and inhuman manner. Please, if anyone saw or heard anything that could help us to catch these murderers, we beg that you step forward to help find my brother's killers." But it wasn't long before Tavisha's killers were found. As it turned out, Qasim Ahmed had stolen the cell phones of 2 young women at knife point just an hour before he murdered Tavisha, and he'd been stupid enough to do it in downtown Sheffield, a place that's practically covered in CCTV cameras. Police tracked him down as a part of their theft investigation, only to find that Qasim was in the process of disposing of clothing that was soaked in blood of his victim. He was arrested and charged with murder, and would go on to be sent to prison for a minimum of 24 years. But 24 years seems like far too lenient a sentence for someone willing to take the life of another human being for nothing more than a mobile phone. And it seems like the only justice for a person responsible for such a cruel cosmic joke, who fabricated a scenario that would horrify all who heard it, deserves to go to prison for much, much longer than just 24 years.
Agreed.
Two stories stand out in my mind.
Dude.
I should note that I work day shift. These happened in broad daylight. It wasn't some spooky old haunted house at night. This stuff creeped me out in the middle of the day. So the first event goes down when I took a delivery to a nice big house in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. This middle-aged guy had to be in his late 50s or 60s, answers the door and invites me in while he goes to grab his wallet. Any other time, I'd have opted to stay outside on the porch, but the house was seriously impressive looking from the outside that I wanted to check out what kind of interiors it had going on. So, I follow him to his back porch but stop dead in my tracks when I notice the large TV screen that's playing some kind of hardcore adult movie. When he noticed I had stopped, and that it was making me uncomfortable, he didn't bother to apologize or turn it off. In fact, he seemed to like the idea that he was basically forcing me to watch something so sleazy,
Oh.
and beckoned me to come out onto the porch to join him. Naturally, I declined, got the money, and left. The other thing happened at an extended stay hotel that had a real bad rep, mostly from fellow delivery drivers who ended up getting robbed or jumped. So I follow the delivery instructions and head around to a side door where I find I actually needed a code to get in. Luckily, a guy sticks his head out of the window and says the pizza's for him, adding that he'll be right down to pick it up. As I'm waiting for the guy to let me in, someone else comes along and lets me in, so I ended up meeting the guy on the stairs. Now, rather than exchanging money and leaving as you might expect, the guy tells me he doesn't have the money. Some other guy back in the room has it and asks me to come upstairs with him. With the first red flag tingling in the back of my head, I step into the elevator with him. The doors close and he says something to the effect of, "Hey, check this out," and begins to lift his shirt. Second and third red flags here. Under his shirt, he's been wrapped with bandages around his stomach. I'll save you the graphic details, but it was obviously a bad wound. A stab wound, if I had to guess.
Oh.
He proceeds to confirm that he was in fact stabbed the other night, and that it was on the news and that I might have seen it. And after a pause in the conversation, that it hurts a lot. With the most awkward silence ever, we step off the elevator, go to his room.
Why would you show a random person that's delivering your food stab wounds?
And he pops inside before coming back to invite me inside. Now, two thoughts go through my mind. Either this is the dumbest setup for a robbery I'd ever seen, or the couch guy is really, really lazy. I eventually settle on the fact that if this were a robbery, the guy probably wouldn't have advertised this gaping stab wound, and I kinda wanted to meet the laziest man in the world. So I step in the door,
Oh my god.
careful not to let freshly mixed stab wounds get my back. Inside, there's an older white-haired man on the couch and a young tweaked-out girl. The man hands the money to the girl, and naturally, it's a $100 bill, and that's the only cash she has. So reluctantly, I make change for him out of my own money, conclude the transaction, and hastily retreat from what I can only assume was some kind of meth house.
Yuck. Absolutely disgusting. Yuck.
So, on the worst delivery shift I ever worked, it's snowing like crazy, and of course my hunk of junk car can't make it up the long residential street to the house at the very top of the hill. After several attempts, I had to face reality, so I got out to begin the walk about 2 or 3 blocks of the snowy road. I get to the large, normal-looking house and ring the bell. No answer, but I hear a guy yelling at someone inside. Knock, ring, no answer. Still yelling, but it's obvious he's yelling at someone on the phone. I can see that the door I'm at goes into a small mudroom with a door to the house inside. I decide to step into the mudroom and knock on the inner door. I know, not a good idea. This guy finally opens the door and is like, "What do you want?" I'm wearing a uniform and holding a pizza delivery. What do you think I want, man? Now, the guy was a middle-aged guy with a mustache, and he has blood coming from a cut on his elbow, a cut on his lip, and blood coming from his nose, and his knuckles are torn up. Great. Dude just got into a fight, and lost by the looks of things. I see inside, and a half-empty bottle of Jack is chilling on the coffee table. I didn't order a pizza. It's probably Frank's, he says. Then the guy just turns and goes back into the living room and sits down to take another swig of Jack. Is Frank here? I ask. Yeah, he's upstairs. The guy points to a staircase just inside the door on the left. Okay, I think to myself. I guess I'll go give the pizza to Frank since Drunk Fighter isn't going to do anything besides get more drunk. I took 2, maybe 3, it's been years since this happened, steps up the stairs and thought, screw this. I immediately backpedal, go to the front door in the mudroom and leave the house and walk back to my car. I didn't call Frank because at that point I was just so livid about getting stuck in the snow, walking uphill through the snow, waiting a while for this drunk idiot to answer the door and getting sketched out. I figured if Frank wanted his pizza, he would call back or come pick it up. Frank never called to ask where his pizza was, and that made me more sketched out about the whole situation. Back when I was in
Alrighty
community
then.
college, I worked at this pizza place that was basically in the middle of nowhere. It was located in a strip mall at the side of a highway in a pretty rural area, and there were just people dotted around the surrounded area that the store never quite went out of business. But since we hardly made any money, we operated a skeleton crew at all hours, and especially late at night. Sometimes it would just be 2 people in the store, me and one other guy. One would make the pies, and the other would drive them out to the customers. It wasn't always a perfect system, but we managed. Without a doubt, the best time to work was Wednesday or Thursday nights, simply because of how quiet it was. You worked a Wednesday or Thursday late shift and basically got paid to sit around on your butt and talk trash with your coworker. You'd maybe get 1 or 2 calls, nothing stressful, and that was that. But this one night, we get a call almost bang on 11 p.m., a half hour before closing. Any other time, we might actually be kinda angry, but it was just way too out of the ordinary for us to even be mad. Like, I think it was legit the first time we'd ever gotten a call that late. Now, at the time, my coworker is out in his car having a quick smoke before we start our clean down, so I'm all on my own when I hear the phone. Part of me was like, just don't answer it, dude. But honestly, curiosity got the best of me. Most of the families in the county work their farms, so they go to bed pretty early in the evening, so who was calling so late? When I pick up, I don't recognize the voice on the end. Given the nature of the job, I pretty much know everyone who calls, along with exactly what they're going to order. But still, it's not entirely unusual that we get someone new calling. But what was really unusual was how this guy's order differed from most others, not to mention how he was acting in general. So right off the bat,
Not gonna mention how all the lights just turned off.
I can tell there's something not quite right with the guy. His voice was super raspy, like he lived in a whiskey still and smoked Marlboros for
Or is that
breakfast.
my shit?
And I know it's about to be a weird call when the first thing he asks for is a hamburger. I'm like, "Sir, this is a pizza place. I can read you our menu if you like." Which was no problem. We only had like 6 different pizzas with a couple of sides. The guy says it's fine. All he wants is hamburger meat. I'm assuming he meant on a pizza since we did actually do a cheeseburger pizza at the time, so I asked some clarification. But no, this guy doesn't want a pizza. He just wants hamburger meat. Raw hamburger meat.
Ew.
I don't even know if I'm allowed to sell raw hamburger meat. Like, I know you can eat raw hamburger meat. Like, I'm pretty sure that's what steak tartare is, but
I
I figured there had to be
realized
some
that
kind of
that
food
was
hygiene law
diet,
against it. I asked my coworker, who was way too blazed to give me a solid answer, so I give the guy an honest answer and tell him I'm not even sure I'm allowed to sell him raw hamburger. The guy started begging and pleading so hard that I was actually speechless for a moment. He sounded like he was fiending for it, so bad that it was actually kind of creepy.
Ew.
I'm even less sure about the whole thing by that point, but after the guy on the phone offers a handsome tip, I make an executive decision and decided to go ahead with the sale. People do dumb stuff for money, right? Well, I suppose this is my thing. I throw what I consider to be $10 retail worth of hamburger meat into a plastic carton, plug this guy's address into my navigation system, then began the drive out to his house. I've been making deliveries in that area of Lawrence County for about 18 months at that time. I'm not saying I knew the place like the back of my hand, but I'd certainly never seen this guy's house before. I didn't even know that old place was there. It was some old farmhouse at the end of a long dirt road, and it looked like it was falling apart. It would have made a great haunted house, and all I could think as my headlights suddenly lit the whole place up was that it was like the start of a horror movie or something. I was the poor, dumb pizza boy, doomed to die in the film's intro that introduced whatever crazed killer or monstrous creature that was the movie's main feature. I park up, walk up the old rickety porch, and since there was no sign of a doorbell, I just knock on this guy's door. When he answers, he actually looks pretty normal. Like he'd expect some decrepit old witch to answer the door to a house like that. Not a guy in a sweater vest who looked like the dad of all dads. As I'm handing over the bag of hamburger meat, I can't resist asking him why he'd ordered raw hamburger and not an actual menu item. I figured he's going to grill it at home or whatever, so I frame my question as such. But the guy just smiles, shakes his head, and tells me he's going to eat it raw. I must have completely failed to hide the look of disgusted confusion on my face, because the guy then launches into this big speech about the benefits of eating raw meat. I mean, he talked a lot of science terms that I didn't understand, but he seemed to know what he was talking about, and it actually weirdly put me at ease for a second as he fished around his wallet for a tip. He hands me $11 in crumpled ones, and as I count them, I'm like, "Thanks, man. That's really generous." But then I look up, just in time to see the guy crack the lid on the plastic container of meat, bring it up to his nose, and take a long, deep sniff of what was inside. The way he acted wasn't like this wholesome, smells yummy kind of happy. It seemed straight up perverse. I'm just watching, trying not to freak out, as the smell of the meat seems to legit turn him on. After he huffs it, he shudders, eyes rolling in their sockets before he gets this glazed look in them, and all I'm thinking is, this is my cue to leave. I awkwardly thank the guy, just happy to get off of his property, only right as I go to turn around and walk back off the porch, I see something moving in the dimly lit hallway over the dude's shoulder. Poking out at about waist height from behind a doorframe was this big pair of terrified eyes looking back at me from sunken sockets. It was a kid. I don't even know what compelled me to ask, but whatever it was so strong that it overrode any desire I had to flee while I still had the legs to carry me. I remember saying something like, "That your kid, huh?" Instead of giving me this big smile or waxing lyrical about what a proud dad they were, something that would have suited his wholesome sweater vest dad look, he suddenly looks furious. He spins around on the spot. The kid looks terrified and disappears from view. Then, when he turns back, he just stares at me, this deep, moody stare that sent a shiver down my spine. And once again, I get that overwhelming "this is my cue to leave" feeling. I thank the guy, backing off the porch in a way where I never quite turn my back on him. He doesn't say a word in response, just keeps that angry look on his face, like I'd done something to offend him or seen something I shouldn't have. It took 20 minutes to drive back to the pizza place. 20 long minutes I had to replay the interaction in my head, over and over again. I called 911 as soon as I got back, like I had no idea what was going on back there, but it couldn't have been good. No kid should be that scared of their dad, if that guy even was that kid's dad at all. My logic was that I could call 911, find out I just came out at a bad time and took the dude's actions out of context and maybe feel a little embarrassed. Or find out that something horrible was happening in that house, feel horrendous guilt that I failed to stop it, and then be haunted for the rest of my life. Though what I wasn't expecting was that there was actually a third option, one that turned out to be worse than the first two. So I call the cops. They go to check it out. Then the deputy gets back in touch to reassure me that he'd been over to the guy's house, had a good look around, and then found that there was nothing wrong. I figured that once a cop had told me that, I'd feel fine. Kind of stupid for assuming stuff, but generally fine. But I didn't. I found myself just not believing the guy. Like he couldn't have seen the same stuff that I had and just walked away being like, yeah, it's all good in that house. I didn't do another delivery to that house for the rest of the time I worked there, and I certainly wasn't complaining about not having to make any more weird deliveries. But even today, I find myself wondering what the deal was with that guy and his kid, and whether or not I should have done more to investigate. Because the thing that haunts me the most is that there might be some kind of kid out there going through the most horrifying ordeal of their young lives, thinking like, why didn't that man help me? Why didn't that man help me?
Bro. Shit. Alrighty. Well, fuck. That was it for this video. Hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, let me know down in the comments. A little bit different, I know. But like I said, I do DoorDash, so I figured might as well watch something that I do. So yeah. If you guys want to see more of these videos, let me know down in the comments, and I will. If you guys want to watch the original video, like I said, I will leave that down in the comment section below also, and not the comment section, I will put that in the link below, and then also the channel. So I will see you guys in the next one. So